right whenever I started Turo, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is one of the few businesses out there where you can truly just like buy another car and like almost guarantee a raise. And it's like, at what point in your job or like in a business where you own, could you very literally like double your income in a matter of a couple months because you invested an additional $5,000 into that?
This is the Passive 25K podcast, a podcast built around the vision of creating wealth through passive income for ourselves and others. The idea of creating income while you sleep seems like a dream come true, but for most professionals, turning this into a reality is a different story. On this show, you will hear real people breaking passive income streams down to the basics, giving you the next steps to start your own passive income journey. If you're new to the show, my name is Kyle Reedstrom from Fargo, North Dakota, where I get to work with my team of agents and investors each day to complete our goal of $25,000 a month in passive income. Now, let's get right into our next conversation. This is the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom. We are the home of Passive Income University and cash flow coaching for that one-on-one piece. We help working professionals with one source of income start and complete their passive income journey. And a quick story here, gang, for all you do-it-yourself property managers out there, we are on your side. I actually think this is a great way, if you're getting into real estate investing, to crank that cash flow up and property manage yourself, get that experience. And we have coursework around that for anybody looking for resources around self-managing properties. Give us a shout. Find us at p25kg.com if you're looking for next steps. Click the button. We would love to talk to you. But today, I am here with my guest, Aubrey, and we get to talk about a growing income stream we've seen some of our community members dive into. This episode is episode 34, going from one car to building a Turo fleet with Aubrey Janik. Aubrey, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, and Aubrey, this is kind of fun. This is the funny part of my job. I get to search and follow badass people doing badass stuff, and I consider you one of those people. And when I was looking for Turo info, you were everywhere. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know, Aubrey has an amazing YouTube channel. She has an awesome follow. She's an awesome follow on Instagram. Definitely, you can pause the podcast. I give you permission and go follow Aubrey right now. And so, Aubrey, beyond that, I would love for you to give a little intro to the audience that's listening to you today so they can kind of get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Aubrey Janik. I'm a car sharing host and content creator based out of like the Dallas, Texas area. And currently I run a 25 car sharing fleet with my husband. And we started this fleet back in 2017. I actually had started it in conjunction with like working my normal job at the time. I owned a franchise. And so I was, had started started doing Turo because I had a Jeep Wrangler that, like a 2-door Jeep Wrangler Sahara that I'd purchased in my early 20s. It was like my first adult car purchase. And I went from having my 1997 Toyota 4Runner to this Jeep Wrangler. And I hated the Jeep so much. I didn't like driving it. I didn't like having a car payment. I really did not like the purchase. And so about 6 months into owning the Jeep, I missed my 4Runner as well. So about 6 months into owning the Jeep, a friend of mine said, yeah, I bought this Mercedes to rent it out on Turo. And at that point I had heard of Turo, but I quite honestly thought it was a scam. And so this friend was like the first person I met that had actually like was using it. And so literally like that night I looked it up and I listed the Jeep onto Turo that night. And it was never my personal car again. Like it went out on its first rental within a day. And from then on out, I like was hooked. I remember after the Jeep went out on its first rental, me thinking to myself, like, okay, this might actually be like an awesome side hustle to do. So we ended up, like with the help of my then boyfriend, now husband, we ended up getting some cars over the years. He was kind of helping me in his spare time. I was doing it more as like like it was my gig and he was just kind of like helping his girlfriend in the process. And then, over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I guess 2017, I guess that's like 6 years, we've grown the fleet to a 25 car fleet. He quit his job at a dealership. He now manages most of the day-to-day stuff. We have a part-time employee and I manage kind of the back-end administrative stuff in conjunction with my content creation.
Wow. I am such a fan of, you just didn't like this new Jeep. You're just a fan of the old 97 4Runner.
And I still drive the 97 4Runner today.
Yes. Coming from a guy that drives a 2010 F-150 that I am like attached to, I'm in. That is awesome.
And I love that you pivoted into like, and from your friend's prompt, right? You said, hey, instead of just getting rid of this, what if, I already have it. What if I could turn this into an income stream? I think that is such an interesting piece of this car sharing world. It's creating income from things a lot of people already have.
Mhm.
Can you talk to that a little bit? Like, this is why I think this is catching on, and in conjunction with, it's actually an amazing service too, and a need.
For sure, 100%. I mean, I think so. I guess there's like two pieces of the coin that you can look at is the side of it being this thing that you can use to make extra money with something that you already have. And there's, I think, a ton of validity behind that. Is there are a lot of people that have 2 or 3 cars and they just don't need them, especially nowadays. Of course, like we have a lot of cars nowadays, but in my current situation, I work from home. And so if I didn't have if I wasn't already doing Turo, it would be something that would be attractive to me because of the fact that like I very literally probably drive an hour a week, like maximum, because I work from home. Everything I do is very close. So like the idea of me having had a car payment even at that time is so stupid. It's like even now as I'm nearing 30, I'm like, I want a nicer car, but like I just can't justify it because I drive so little. And you do have these people that have purchased cars. They either regret the decision or they figure out it was just unnecessary and they kind of don't really know what to do about getting out of it. And going into Turo with that car that they don't really want or don't really have a use for is an excellent way to either make extra money or simply cover the car payments, which depending on the cars is super feasible. And then there is, of course, the other side of it where it's providing a need. It's a proven system, a proven process, and it can be something that can be scaled to a legitimate business stream that makes a lot of money. So there's just a lot of, I think, varying levels of this business model, depending on how serious you want to take it. And I think that's really great.
Yeah, I want to perk anyone's ears that can fit in that box that Aubrey just said, which is I'm working from home, which is more than ever.
Yeah.
And I just don't drive that much, or I just don't like to, I don't need to. But you can't not have a vehicle, like in a lot of situations. So it's like, I kind of have to have this thing, and how many of you listening right now have that vehicle that maybe you put less than 300 miles a month on, and you have a payment coming out of your account. You're the one that you work so hard for, a payment's coming out of it to pay for this unused asset, right? It's squeaky clean in the garage. I can just see it. And it's like, well, what do I do? And so I like that prompt because I think there's people out there that can fit. And even if you do use it, this can be an amazing opportunity. The one thing that I've heard come up, and Aubrey, I know you've heard it come up, is getting into this business, especially when we talk about scale, cars go down in value, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's a thing, like depreciating, it's technically in that depreciating asset category. The funny part about that is it's usually on how many miles they're driven, not how like long you've owned it, right? And stuff like that. But talk to us about that. Like, how do you feel about that? How do you navigate that when people are like, well, real estate investing is this, and then this car stuff is, well, how can I buy a depreciating asset?
For sure. So I think that's a great question. And it's one, to your point, I get asked it. I either get asked it or people just blatantly tell me every single day, like, well, you don't know what you're talking about because it's a depreciating asset. And it is like, I always tell people like with it, because I actually just got into the real estate investing game. My husband and I bought our first rental property last month. And the way that I described it, whenever people ask me like, well, why are you going into real estate if Turo is working so well? And I say, I think Turo is one of the best cash generating like hustles that you can do out there. I think that real estate's a wealth building tool. It's like, I'm not going to become somebody who's worth $100 million through Turo. I'm just not going to, but I can generate the cash that I need to not only live off of, buy the things that I want to buy for personal use, but then also invest into other avenues as well, like real estate using Turo. And so it's kind of a vehicle to help you get to that point where you are making, a lot more money and you're worth 7, 8, 9 figures, which I think is a track that I'm trending towards whenever I retire, being to that point. And Turo is 100% a huge part of that. But then as far as like answering the question about depreciation, I think that it's definitely a concern. And so that's where I think that business models with Turo are not all created equal. And so if you buy, for example, if you look online on Turo hosts, really anybody except for me talking about it online is always talking about how whenever they go onto Turo, they're buying really cool cars, like these sexy cars that people want to buy because they're super cool. And 2023 models, 2022, 2021, these newer cars. And I always like anytime somebody says I'm making X amount of dollars per month and it's a 2021 model or any newer model, I'm always like skeptical. The red flags are blaring in the back of my mind because they obviously haven't taken depreciation into account. Whereas the business model that I use is buying cars at the bottom of the depreciation curve that are below market value. And so, for example, and I lucked out quite a bit because the car market just absolutely boomed in the last couple of years. And so there was a lot of my cars that truly doubled in value. But in fact, all of my cars did for about 2 years. But even cars like, for example, I bought a Ford Focus back in February for $5,000. That car I could sell in 2 years for probably close to $5,000, if not a little bit above that. So if that car I needed to sell tomorrow, I could sell it for probably $6,000, make $1,000 profit. And it's all because I bought it at the right price where it's not going to more. So that part of the equation I think is crucial to just longevity and scalability with Turo because it protects you from that depreciation.
Man, I love what you just said. Strategy, and if you include strategy in this, your two criteria is bottom of the depreciation curve and below value. You can kind of start to mitigate this depreciation conversation. Hey, by the way, all real estate investors out there, me being one of them, how many of you have bought that appreciating asset that needs a lot of capital expenses and you overpaid for it, which is the opposite of that spectrum, So it's kind of like you always have to have strategy with anything you do. Aubrey, I think that was great. You touched on that. Any strategies to do that? Any things like specifically you look for in order to execute what you just said, which is load that bottom of depreciation and finding vehicles below market value?
For sure. Like at this point, we've kind of perfected our strategy, and it's something that we talk a lot with our like course members and the followers on my YouTube channel. And it's a few key things. So number one is buying reliable cars. Like we don't mess with brands that have poor reliability. And some of the brands that we buy a lot are like ones that people tell me all the time, like these are junk brands. For example, Hyundai's a perfect example, but we buy brands that we find reliable. We know how to work with them, or we know how to use the warranty system to our benefit. So for example, Hyundai, which has like a historical spotty reputation, they have a really great warranty associated with the engine because of a lawsuit that they had years ago. So we know that that's something we can use. Ford, my husband is very good at working with Fords. He knows them inside and out. We go with that. Toyota, I know Toyotas. I've had them my entire life, except for that Jeep snafu. So we go with a lot of Toyotas. And so we go with these brands that we know really well. And we know like how to find the parts. We know how to diagnose the cars. We know just everything about them. And so that's kind of our first piece of criteria. Buying cars that are a money pit, that's going to be a disaster. And so buying the right cars. And then we also make sure is we pay a lot of attention to the historical pricing of the car. And so we want to be able to see that, like, for example, with Turo, you can buy a car that's 12 years old or newer with 130,000 miles or less. So right now, the oldest car you can buy is a 2011. And so the way that we'll look and see if a car is at the bottom of the depreciation curve is if we see, a 2011 Ford Focus with 125,000 miles, and that car is selling for about the same price as a 2009 Ford Focus with 175,000 miles, that's a good sign that like $5,000 price point or whatever the price point is at the bottom of the depreciation curve. And you see this all the time with like other types of cars as well. An example I've used probably a dozen times on my channel is a Lamborghini Gallardo. If you look at a 2006 Lamborghini Gallardo, 2005, and you find one that has 30,000 miles, that Lamborghini is going to be about around 100,000 miles. If you find one that's either a little bit older or a little bit newer with a little bit different mileage, it's still going to be that same price point. You don't really find a Lamborghini less than 100K. So 100K for a Lamborghini is that depreciation bottom. You're not going to find it much cheaper. So, if you bought that car today, you could probably sell for the same price in a year or 2 years. And so it's just making sure that, like, as the car gets older, at some point it hits a cap, and it becomes very obvious what that like bottom cap is by looking at similar listings with varying years and mileage.
Man, that was loaded with good information for anybody looking to buy a car. That's just very good strategy there. What about like recycling? Recycling is the wrong word, but I'm just saying like changing out your fleet. Are you like, is there like a date with that, or like, hey, we're now expiring, this car's done its job, we're going to sell it and purchase? Do you have that kind of a strategy around that?
We do and we don't. So it's kind of like a haphazard strategy, I would say. But that's a really good question. So I'm very meticulous with our numbers. So we run P&Ls every month for not only the business, but also each individual car. So we know really detailed how cars are trending and how they're performing. And if a car is becoming more of an issue than it's worth, then we'll sell it. But we don't have a blanket statement of saying, hey, this is the max mileage that we're going to go with, or this is the max cap that we're going with, just because the experience of different cars is going to be very different depending on the car. For example, a couple of years ago, we had a Ford Fusion that was just having so many issues. It kept having seized rotors. It was just having a lot of brake issues. We were like, okay, this is no longer worth it. It's hurting our ratings. And so if a car is either becoming too expensive, it's costing us to have bad ratings, it's just a pain, or it's just getting too worn down, that's whenever we'll sell it. But we're really going after that low-end economy renter. A lot of our renters are local renters. It's the people that need a car because theirs is in the shop. We're really going after that budget renter. And so for them, they don't really care if a car is high mileage, as long as it runs well, has what they expected it to have, and is affordable. And so because of that, we actually have cars in our fleet that have, I think our highest mileage car has 250,000 miles. And so but like that's a Ford Escape. It's a reliable model. Like our Kia Rio would never make it to that point. It would have to be gone long before that. And we also get a lot of cars that we've had a lot of total losses over the years. So whenever cars are total lost, that's of course kind of that natural point where it's like, this is obviously no longer going to be in our fleet. And then we replace it.
Man, I think you just broke the glass for a lot of people on how many miles you can have for a reliable car, right? Like that's more than I would expect. But how are we judging these cars? It's not about just, oh, it seems like it's old. Like if you're running those individual P&Ls for each car, it's continuing to perform, it's reliable. Why would we not keep going with this? Right. That's a really cool piece there. And this information is amazing. And I want to turn the conversations towards the scale aspect, because one of the things that you guys have done is got to that 25 car mark. And with that scale comes, I think, a lot of the unknown, which kind of keeps people on the sideline with like moving this, increasing this. Talk to us about your mindset with scale with Turo specifically.
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as scalability with Turo, I mean, for me personally, I know that as I got like right whenever I started Turo, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is one of the few businesses out there where you can truly just like buy another car and like almost guarantee a raise. And it's like, at what point in your job or like in a business where you own, could you very literally like double your income in a matter of a couple months because you invested an additional $5,000 into that? And that's like what I think car sharing provides. It's this really easy to calculate scalability associated with the business model. And there is like that aspect. And I actually talked about this recently in one of my videos, is like, as you begin to scale upward, that like multiplication factor isn't quite as accurate. Like, for example, if you have one car and then you grow to 25, that revenue and profit isn't going to equally grow because your expenses go up with it. But there is like that, just like, I know that if I buy, 5 more cars by the end of the year, my monthly revenue is going to go up by about $5,000. And there's just like no other like YouTube, my course, or any other form of income that I have in my life, real estate, that multiplication factor not only is it not as predictable, it's not as reliable, and it certainly isn't certain. But with Turo, it's pretty close to certain. And so for us, like we knew that we wanted to grow to a certain income level. We knew we wanted to just get to a point where we're getting there today. And we knew that Turo could be that vehicle for that. And so it was just a matter of, okay, this is where we want to be in 5, 10, 15 years. And we're going to use Turo as a vehicle to get us there.
Yeah, there's a lot of control there. Like you really can start to, depending on the investment, right? But if you're kind of shopping for this and you can understand your cash flow and you're kind of getting in, ripping that Band-Aid off of the first few, man, you can really start to put the markers out there, the checkpoints for you.
It's so controlled. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, it's such a controlled revenue stream.
Yeah. And I think it's nice from both regards. Like, for example, one of our goals is to get to 35 cars by the end of the year. And we knew that the second half of 2023 was going to be really backfilled of cars, because we knew the front half of 2023 was just going to be really busy. And so like we bought, I think it was 4 cars in the first couple of months of 2023, but then basically the second quarter of this year, we didn't buy any because we just had a lot of stuff going on with our other businesses. We had some personal stuff going on. My sister's pregnant. So like, it was that stuff going on that we were just like, we know that this is going to be a crazy period of time. So we're not going to buy any more cars because we don't want to put any more work on either of us. And so there isn't really that many business models where you really truly can like plan your growth that strategically to be like, hey, I know that this summer, like X, Y, and Z is happening. I'm going to be really busy. So let's hold off buying more cars. We're okay keeping our income where it is right now. And then towards the end of the year, when we're a bit more slow and kind of ready to like dive headfirst into business again, we'll buy more and make more money as a result. So I think the control aspect is great from a number of different angles.
Yeah. And for people looking at getting into that second source of income, or maybe that third, right? This is where the Turo conversation has come up the most. I mean, man, what other examples can you have fairly low cost to entry? And then there's a lot of education out there, especially people like Aubrey that are there for resource to be like the how. And all of a sudden you're $5,000 to $7,000 away from a legit revenue stream that's you can control. I mean, I really think people need to consider this. And you touched on liquidity versus net worth. I think you hit that right on the head. Real estate investing with the right investments, yes, there's cash flow there. There's a wedge being driven with the debt going down, the appreciation going up. But man, nothing beats really, really great liquidity with just cash generation. And Turo jumps right into that category like fast. So, and I mean that's what you said, right, Aubrey? Just to kind of reiterate, you guys are using some of this capital to not only live your life, but like you're pouring into other revenue streams.
For sure. And that's something I talk about a lot on my channel is Turo has never been 100% of my income, and it never will be. It's something that we do and will continue to grow, and it's a huge part of our lives, but we will never rely on it for 100% of our income because, one, I think it's a bad idea. You will never own Turo outright. You'll never have control of the platform. I think putting your eggs into that basket solely is a bad idea. But then there is like that, like it's such a cash heavy business that like there really is, it gets to the point sometimes with like my husband and I, if we're not actively buying more cars, it's like, what do we do with this money? Like we need to figure out something to do with it. And so it is like that aspect of, we're actively investing into our retirement funds. We're buying real estate. We're planning to buy more real estate this year. And it's just like, there isn't, in my opinion, there isn't a business out there that really generates that same level of cash flow, especially whenever you look at the amount of investment that's required in order to get there. Like the ROI for especially low end economy cars is just insane.
Yeah, that's super cool. And Aubrey, you had an amazing post recently on your Instagram channel, and it was kind of along the lines of the question, if I had to start over with just my car, here's what I'd do. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is a question we get asked all the time. How do I get started? Where do I start? And you kind of talk to like the side hustle mentality of like, hey, here's what you have. Here's some opportunities to create cash, and that's going to fuel all of this. Can you touch on kind of your side hustle mentality with that post?
Yeah, for sure. So, I just think that side hustles are incredible. Like I'm such a firm believer in just creating side hustles in the gig economy and just working your butt off in your early 20s, mid 20s, late 20s, really your entire 20s, or until like you start having a family and other obligations, working as hard as you can to just make as much money as possible, because I think it's just a huge game changer. And whenever it comes to the gig economy, I think it's great because growing up and, I was kind of raised in the era where, like it was right before gig economy stuff really started taking off. So having a gig work job in high school or in college wasn't like a thing. It wasn't until after I graduated, or I dropped out of college, but it wasn't until after I dropped out of college where that was actually like becoming a reality for a lot of people. And I wasn't interested in like doing Uber or Lyft, but growing up, I always thought to myself, like, in order to be a multimillionaire, you had to like start a huge company, like be one of these people that you see on TV or in magazines and create something that is truly revolutionary. And I'm certainly not smart enough to do that. So the entire idea of doing that has always been really daunting. And as I got older, I'm like, well, how am I going to end up creating the life that I want? Because I don't think I have the ability to create this like revolutionary business. And then the gig economy comes into play, and I started making money from that. And it's like, oh, well, this is how you do it. Like, you don't need to have this huge company with a ton of employees to make really incredible income. You can diversify your income, be smart about where that diversification is, and you can make great income with a really small team. I mean, in the case of, my husband and I started the business back in 2017. He joined in 2021 full time, but it's been something where we now have 5-6 revenue streams. It's just the two of us full time with a part-time employee and a couple of 1099 contractors. And we're able to create this really, really great business that I think prior you really couldn't have done without an office space and a full staff and like a proper workforce. And I just think that the gig economy is incredible. I think it's the best way to grow your income and your wealth quickly. And I'm such a proponent of it.
Man, I'm glad we touched on that, because I think, again, it's people are right there from jumping in and like doing that, and then kind of having doubts and fears around like, what will people think, or this isn't normal, or, it's like that hustle is really where you can start to make a huge gap and pull away and really start crushing your goals a lot faster. We're going to take a little break. I want to come back. I want to talk about the numbers of what's kind of behind some of this with like, what's a 25 car fleet look like? I want to talk automation. I'm super excited to continue this conversation with Aubrey Janik. We'll be right back.
Hey, wanted to take a quick break from this week's episode, wondering if you've been asking yourself the question, how do I get started in this stuff? Or what are the next steps? Or where are people that are thinking the same way I am, or that are already doing this stuff? People that are on their passive income journey. Well, we were getting this question a lot. And that's why we were prompted to create a community of like-minded investors and entrepreneurs that we call Passive Income University. This is a place where we have a library of videos of things we've done and ways you can educate yourself on the passive income space. We've brought in experts and had conversations of people that have done this, are currently doing this, and have completed certain parts of this. We have gathered a collection of tools, information, spreadsheets, checklists for you to use in order to continue on your journey in the passive income space. We are going to learn and grow together in order for us to start, take next steps, and complete our passive income journey. If you're curious about taking your next steps, check out our website at p25kg.com, where you can apply to be a part of Passive Income University today.
We are back on the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom, episode 34. We're talking about going from one car to building a Turo fleet with Aubrey Janik. Aubrey has been dropping some awesome nuggets for us already. But I want to get into some of the numbers that you have with a fleet like this. I think this is eye-opening. Aubrey, you can share as much as you're willing, but I always love to get examples. I always love to hear kind of some of the dirty details behind some of these revenue streams people create. And then I kind of have some additional questions. So like, what does that look like for you? And I'm really curious about like, okay, your cars are bringing in this much. And, this chunk is expenses. I love that you said you have a P&L total and P&L for every vehicle. So I'm like, okay, let's nerd out on that, So share as much as you're willing on like kind of how your business functions from a number standpoint.
For sure. So for our fleet, we have 25 cars, 24 of them are on Turo, and then one is on Outdoorsy and RV Share. It's a camper van that we converted. And so that's like the breakdown of how the cars are. And so for example, the camper van is much more seasonal. It's not rented out every single day, but it's rented for a significantly higher price than the other cheaper cars. But we in general make about 25,000 a month is pretty where the average is revenue wise. And then profit ends up coming out anywhere between 18 to 20,000 a month. There are, of course, those months where it's less than that and sits closer to that like 16, 17 mark. There is some months where it's just for some reason expenses are very low and it's higher, but that kind of 18, 19-ish mark is where it typically sits. And so our cars, what we have found over the years, there is a number of expenses that are pretty constant. One of the downsides of having older cars is the repairs and maintenance. And this is where buying reliable cars is very, very, very important. Is people always tell us, if you have older cars, it's going to be so expensive to repair. You might as well buy a newer car. And I think that this is true if you buy an unreliable old car, but we like to buy cars that, they are reliable, and they're older, but even older reliable cars need some work. So some of our biggest expenses on an ongoing basis are, of course, oil, tires, but then we also do quite a lot of suspension work on the cars about once a year for each car, maybe once every 18 months. And then just like we invest a lot back into the business when it comes to like diagnosing cars, repairing cars. That's probably one of our most efficient aspects of the business is the fact that we can turn around a car so fast. If it has a repair, we'll make sure it's fixed within an hour, a couple hours in most cases. And so getting our fleet to that point where we can pretty much turn our home garage into a like mini auto repair shop has definitely been a big investment over the years, which goes into the cost of the fleet as well. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's also the damage claims associated with it are a big part. So the way that our business model is set up is that we've designed it to where we actually profit off of most of our damage claims. But of course, if we have a big damage claim that is really costly, it'll affect it. If we don't have a damage claim at all, it'll affect it. So there's kind of these sliding things that, like, depending on what's going on in that month, the revenue and the profit will be either up or down. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistently around that figure.
Thank you for sharing that. And for the repairs piece, I can see where that's one of the highlights, right? They always say, like, look at your top line expense. How can you take that back? Have you guys jumped into like self repair, like just from your own knowledge? Is that kind of how or do you have like a partnership with a local mechanic shop, or how's that look for you guys?
So both. So I'm fortunate because my husband is a big car guy. He really likes cars. And so he works on most of the cars that we have in our fleet. I do like to add the caveat because people will often say, if you don't have the knowledge of cars that my husband has, and it makes it hard to work on your own cars. From 2017 to 2021, I worked on most of the cars myself whenever he was working at the dealership. Obviously, I can't do as much as he does, but there was like years where I did oil changes, tire rotations, brake jobs. I would replace like basic parts here and there, which saved a ton. And now that he's quit his dealership job and works for the company full time, he does most of our repairs. But it's a combination of a few different things. So like the basic repairs and maintenance, we do 100% in-house. For the more complicated stuff that either is going to just take too much time or it's out of our skill level, we do have a lot of relationships with local shops that we've made over the years by just, getting to know the owners, bringing them breakfast, making sure that the techs know like who we are. And then whenever we have these major issues that we can't solve or we don't have the time to solve, we will take it to a shop. Like, for example, one of our cars is at a shop right now.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it's kind of finding that go-to, building that partnership. We're big on that. And I'm interesting to kind of see the trend of the numbers, right? 24 cars with the seasonal, and I'm seeing that 25,000 a month, a pretty high profit margin, right? Like expenses are on the lower, if I did a percentage, lower 20 to 30% of that. So it's like $1,000 a car if I was just going to be general. Which is, again, it speaks to the liquidity. It speaks to, how profitable this business can be. When you said the resources you have available, you said you have one part-time person, and so it's you and your husband that are operating this, which is, I think, in a common category of someone that, you'd kind of be that owner operator. Then you have a part-time person, and do you use some virtual assistants or 1099 contractors you mentioned? Talk to us about your like staff, if you will.
Yeah. So the way that it works is, so we technically have, and the reason why I mentioned this is because it's important to the context of like who we have helping. So we have like our content creation business, which is like a media production company, which handles our course, my YouTube channel, our social media, that stuff. And then we have the car sharing business, which is like an entirely separate thing. It's where we have our van, our cars, that stuff. We have the real estate aspect of the equation. And I also work a part-time corporate job as well. And so there's a lot of moving pieces. And so there is, like, for example, our part-time employee, he helps purely with the cars. So like he's just a employee of our car sharing business. We have a couple of 1099 workers that do help me with editing. And so like that allows me to dedicate time to, making sure I can do the monthly P&Ls, making sure I'm staying top of everything I need to take care of. And then we also have we have an accountant, we have a bookkeeper. And so there's kind of these like little pieces of the puzzle that like might not go specifically to this like car sharing business, but because it's taking my time away from other things, it allows for me to then dedicate time for the car sharing business. So it's kind of all intertwined in one way or another.
Awesome. Is that part-time person with just the car sharing business, is that kind of a jack of all trades, or are there specific things that person's doing with their role?
So he is our neighbor. So that's how we got to know him. But he is a 19-year-old kid. He left graduated high school, is trying to figure out, what does he want to do for the rest of his life. And so he got to know my husband, and it was like, hey, you have an interest in cars. Like, how about you join our team and you'll help us do things. And so he isn't he isn't a certified mechanic or anything. Basically, his role is to do kind of the the boring, mundane work of like cleaning the cars, checking them in, doing that stuff we don't have him work on the cars because of liability issues. Of course, we don't want a car going out that hasn't properly been repaired, but he is learning the business at the same time so that as the fleet grows, he can kind of, the goal is to get to the point where HP can almost step out. Like as I've stepped out of the day-to-day operations, we want HP, my husband, to be able to do the same thing and then kind of have this employee, Michael, to kind of take HP's role and then kind of rinse and repeat with more employees as the fleet grows.
That's really cool. And that's that was where I was kind of leading this question was, I've heard you're kind of stepping out of the day-to-day. You kind of have that oversight. You're kind of working on the business maybe more than in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the goal for your husband too. I think this is a thing that happens with anybody with an active income stream that they're trying to turn more and more passive. You start to kind of work your way out of it, and it can come with not always the straightest line. It could be a zigzag, but I hear that in what you're doing. And so like for now, as far as like hours worked, your husband's kind of in that full-time role, correct? Like that would be like 30, 40 hours a week type of thing.
I would say with the fleet specifically, because again, it's one of those things where, and I actually talked about this in a recent video as well, is if either my husband or myself were working purely on the car sharing fleet, we 100% could do it on our own, like probably past 50, 60 cars. And so the need to get the employee doesn't necessarily come with the 25 cars. It comes with like all of these other pieces of the puzzle as well. And so for HP, I would say he definitely spends most of his time on the car sharing fleet for sure. But I would say the hour breakdown is probably 30 maybe hours a week. And then it's the rest of the time working on additional things, either for like all of the companies together, working on, content creation with me, helping me with things and stuff like that.
Okay. And then for you, the position you're in, would you say you're kind of like under that 4 hours a week type of window? Sometimes I like that as a, yeah. Gotcha. And then you've got your part-time. Okay. Cool. Yeah. I love hearing about kind of how you've built your team around this, because I think that's a neat thing too. And you would say with your current team that you have, you could probably get to, I heard a couple numbers. What do you think you could scale to with this kind of setup?
Quite a lot. So the way we have things currently set up, I think we could easily get to 50 cars. I think that we could potentially run into a parking situation at that point. So we would need to like reevaluate where like we keep the cars. But as far as like staffing, I think we could easily get to 50. I think that if we didn't have like the stuff going on in our life outside of car sharing, I think that we could easily get to 100 between the three of us. Maybe not easily, it would be hard, but we could get to it. We could, I think, very realistically get to 100 between the three of us, myself, my husband, and our employee. But I think with our current setup and like our current obligations, and of course, making the assumption that these other revenue streams are growing as well, and thus taking more time, I think 50 would be a pretty realistic setup. It'd be probably stretching us a bit thin if we were to also grow other businesses as well, but I think we could get there with the three of us.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. Those numbers are really neat. I'm sitting here thinking, some people, I always joke, they don't want to get into real estate or property management because they're like, I don't want to get a call for a leaky toilet in the middle of the night, or, something's happened. That's probably a bad example. Or like my furnace is out in the middle of the night. That's probably a better one. What is that for the car sharing world? What is the fires that you guys run into? Like hey, we're rocking 30 cars, we're rocking 50 cars. And then it's like, that moment that's like, everything's going to crap, but then it's always handling chaos, right?
For sure. I mean, it happens all the time. And it's funny because this is like a common conversation that I have with like my dad is like, I'll be like, I run with my dad all the time. And so like, I always have to have my phone on me and somebody will call me and it'll be an issue. And then my dad's like, that's why I don't do what you do. Like you might be making good money, but it's such a pain. And so there is like, I think there is definitely like the same types of fires that you have to put out. And fortunately, like I think whenever you develop a system and a process to like maintain your cars well, those fires are fewer and far between and they're easier to deal with. I think whenever you're first growing, you're first starting, everything feels like a major fire because you don't know how to navigate the system. But in the position that we're in now, like even because I'm oftentimes the one that puts out the fires because all the accounts are linked to my name. And so if there's an issue, I'm the one who gets called. And so even with like the fires that I have to put out, I'm still kind of under that 4 hour per week, which I think is pretty good. But they include a variety of different things. I mean, we'll have we had a guest over the weekend we were actually out of town for a work conference for my corporate job. And we had a guest call us at like 1:30 a.m. And she was so upset that there was a bug in the car. And she had had the car for like 8 hours at that point. So she had had it for a very long time. And she was livid that there was a bug in the car. And so it was like this entire, it was just this entire weird dialogue that we then had to have of being like, hey, it's Texas, it's summer, like bugs can get in the car. Like it doesn't necessarily mean that the car is testing. So you also have this, like these real legitimate issues that do occasionally pop up where, this morning, one of our cars had a flat tire because somebody ran a nail over it. You'll have occasional issues where cars break down. And so they definitely do come up. I would say not often, but like as expected, just because cars are cars, they break. But it really does come down to like making sure you have a way to maintain your cars properly. I remember back in 2021, before my husband quit his job, I was managing at that point, I think 14 cars on my own, in addition to doing freelancing and in addition to YouTube. And I was like just way in over my head on the amount of cars that I had and like all the stuff that I needed to do. And I didn't know cars as well as my husband. And I remember like at the time, cars were just constantly having issues. But ever since we've developed and really taken the time to develop a system to maintain our cars, the issues are much more minor and they're much, much easier to address.
Yeah, I can see where your energy shifts after a few of those pain points towards like, let's just take really good care of our babies, let's just make sure, you can kind of start to even foreshadow like, okay, tires are getting thin. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How can we rotate? I can start to see how you would pencil this out pretty quick of like, okay, here's our proactive maintenance checklist,
You
like,
have
boom.
to. Yeah, you have to do that. And so it's like we use a Google spreadsheet, but I know of hosts that have a few hundred cars that do the same thing. They have like a Google spreadsheet or an Excel document where everything gets kept track of, because it is like, and I'm sure you understand in the world of real estate, it's the same type of thing. Like there's nothing worse than like laying on the couch at 9:30 p.m. or 10 o'clock after a hard day at working. And then it's like, you just know that it's somebody about to complain to you about something. It like makes your heart sink. And so we are always trying to mitigate that from happening, because it's just such a pain. And so it's so much easier to prevent it from happening than having to then go back and deal with it.
And in the world of real estate, and there's some parallels here. I think this is good. A lot of people that have that pain will start to hire a property manager, right? Like, and that property manager sits in that role. For this world, there's not like that necessarily, or, essentially you could kind of work your way out of this. How do you envision right now, Aubrey, for you to get to a place where you're not even the person that's answering that fire call? Is that something that you have in your, kind of in the plans down there? Or is that just, you're going to have to kind of stay in that seat for your fleet?
I don't know. I kind of flip back and forth with it a lot, to be honest. Is like there is like that kind of undecided thing in the back of my head of like, okay, how many cars is just too many for me to have? Like I know I don't want to be a host with 100 cars. Like I just don't think that that's in the cards for me. Especially as I get older and priorities pivot. Just like and I've said it a lot on my channel, is like the days of me being able to work multiple revenue streams, working 6 days a week, 13, 14 hours per day. Those days are limited. Like I'm not going to be able to do that forever. I know that. And so there is like that kind of same side of the coin of saying like, when am I at enough cars? And I'm not there yet, but I know, like, I'm pretty certain I don't want to ever get to 100. Like I think my cap might be at that 50 mark. And so I think if we were at the 50 mark, I would probably just stay in that role, but make sure that other people were trained to also be in it, so that and we're doing that now with our employees. Like it was previously, like whenever we would travel, which was very rarely, I would have to make sure I had cell service all the time, because like if there was a problem, I would need to make sure to address it. And I tend to get like really anxious with that type of stuff. So like I'm a bit like overboard on the end. Like I don't think that you necessarily need to have your phone on you at all times, but like I'm just kind of like that. And so I would have to have my phone. But now it's like if I'm out of commission, I can be like, hey, Michael, I'm going to be out for a few hours, like make sure to have your phone on you if there's a problem. And so those fires can be distributed, I think, better than previously. But I think I'll always probably have a role with it as long as we stay in that 50 car mark. If we end up going above that and we decide, hey, let's expand to other markets, let's get more cars, then I would just try to transition out of it.
Yeah. And it's an interesting prompt, because I see like your numbers are so healthy with this revenue stream, which I know we've touched on, which, lends to say, could a section of that be placed off towards, that leverage or, some of that. But it's just a cool place. And I think that that's the uniqueness of this industry right now, is it's not inundated with car share managers and things like that. It's
Getting
it's
there
still,
though. There are
yeah,
more. Yeah.
I believe it. I believe it. I want to talk automation a little bit with this because I think there's some unique things there, and I want to start with like pickups, drop-offs, park. You mentioned parking. I'd love to hear kind of how you guys systemize that with a scaled fleet.
For sure. So that's been a big part of just the entire process of like, it's been a huge piece of the puzzle in us being able to do other things outside of car sharing. It's been a huge piece of allowing for us to have a life outside of car sharing because I do work a lot, but part of that is because I just love working. Like it's kind of the only hobby that I have, but I do think that we have a pretty good work-life balance whenever we want to have it. And our automations and systems are the reason why this is the case. So there are a few things. Number one is we store our cars really close to where we live. It's a very close drive. So we actually like stage all of our cars, like or prep our cars at our house. They're cleaned at our house, disinfected. All the work is done at our house. We also, all of the shops that we work for or like with, they are located within about a 5-minute drive. And so either my employee or my husband, like whenever a car needs to be dropped off at a shop, will actually like get a boosted board and ride back. And so it makes it so like we don't have to coordinate of like, hey, can you pick me up from the shop at this time? It's all very easy because it's all so close. And then in addition to that, being able to like quickly pop down at our lot if there is an issue is something that's really convenient. Like it's not this thing where we have to then, ruin our night by driving 30 minutes to the airport to solve an issue. Like it's literally, and it occasionally does happen where there is an issue with a car or there's an issue with something. And like one of us has to like either get out of bed really quickly in the morning and go deal with it or get up from watching TV at night and go deal with it. But it's a 5-minute ordeal rather than an hour one because it's so close. So that's a key portion. We also do all of our key exchanges remote. So we never meet any guests in person. All of it's done remotely. And so Turo actually has like a remote key exchange. Well, and we do meet our van renters in person. So those we do rent out, but those are much longer. So it's much less inconvenient. But for our Turo cars, we have lock boxes at the vehicle and we provide them with instructions on accessing the lockbox. And we just need like photos of their ID prior. And so that's been a huge game changer because if there are a lot of Turo hosts out there that meet all of their guests in person. And whenever you meet a guest in person, you're at the mercy of their timetable. And so if a guest is late, if they're early, if they're unresponsive, like you're very literally your entire day is held up on them. And so for us, like we are responsible for cleaning the car, taking the photos within the terms of service outlined by Turo, which is 24 hours before and after the trip. But we can have a guest, book a car for 6 a.m. in the morning and we'll prep it the day before. So then like, we don't even have to wake up to facilitate the key exchange. Like everything's getting sent out automatically and everything's getting done without us having to do it because they're meeting the car there, or it makes it so that we can travel easier. We can go, out to dinner and do a key exchange. It just makes everything much easier. And then the last piece of the puzzle is like the Turo automation. So Turo actually used to have a third-party API access to a company called CarSync, which did a bunch of automation. They recently ended that and started doing their own automation, which isn't perfect, but it's pretty good and they're improving on it. But it makes it so that you can send out messages automatically. So like all of our guest communications automatically sent. We of course still have to pay attention to messages, like answer one-off questions. But this way it very literally could be like, and it happens often enough where a guest will book a car at midnight. I go to bed at like 9:30, 10 o'clock a.m. every day or 10 o'clock p.m. every day. And a guest will like get the key instructions. They'll get access to the car and they'll take the car without me having to even wake up. And so everything is as automated as possible.
Wow. Yeah, I figured because when you scale, like you have to have those thoughts, but it's just cool to hear that can exist, and getting to that place has to feel good. But again, you can kind of check in, you can kind of see it happening, jump in as necessary.
For sure.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is another benefit of having like a location that's so close to you is like, because it's so close, like we'll very literally, like I'll be going to the grocery store and on my way home, I'll just like go the long way to like stop by the lot and be like, okay, let's like put my eyes on the car and see what's going on. And so it allows for you to kind of keep like your hand on the pulse of the business without having to like kind of uproot your day in order to do it. It makes it really convenient, really easy to manage. And I think that it has allowed for us to have these other income streams that then has allowed for us to like grow our income much faster.
Yeah, man, that's super cool. This has been a wealth of information, Aubrey. I just want to say that I think this has been so great to just talk about Turo from this angle with all this, with where you guys are going, what you guys have now. Definitely kind of opening my eyes. Aubrey, where can people find you? Where can people learn more about what you're doing? How can people connect?
Yeah, for sure. So my main social media is my YouTube channel. It's just like self-titled Aubrey Janik. That's on YouTube. I also have a vlog channel that I do with my husband. We're much less consistent on that channel, but that's kind of a channel designed to show people what we're actually doing on a day-to-day basis. Whereas like my channel's behind this desk and it's just kind of talking. I have a TikTok account, Aubrey.Janik, Instagram, Aubrey.Janik. We have a TikTok account with my husband, HP and Aubrey. That's both of the YouTube and the TikTok with my husband. But then we also have the car sharing masterclass, which is our course teaching people how to start and scale a car sharing fleet with the same business model that we use. So that's definitely one of the key components of where people can, have conversations with me about growing their car sharing fleet and doing kind of the same thing I'm doing.
Oh man, what a great resource. Car sharing masterclass. If you want to do some of the same things that you heard here, and there's a lot. I think there's a lot of nuances, and you can go learn this the hard way, or there's resources out there. And I think Aubrey's a great leader for this. Thank you for being a lighthouse for people curious about this, Aubrey. I truly think you're empowering people to start creating revenue, because this is one of those things that you can get into it. Like, people could be listening to this and next month take some steps to implement this, truly.
For sure.
And with the assets they already own. That's the best part. So thank you for your time today. Really enjoyed having you on here. I'll end the episode asking you, the audience, the same things I always do. What is one action step you can take based on what you heard today? Do not wait. Action is key. I always say that. And if you're currently on your passive income journey, reach out to us. Tell us your story. We love to hear them. We truly believe that we can accomplish financial freedom better together.
This has been another episode of the Passive 25K podcast with Kyle Reedstrom. If you liked what you heard today, I encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video so we can get more of these conversations out to people that are curious about starting their passive income journey. And if you are thinking about starting your passive income journey, the next steps are to go to our website at p25kg.com and hit apply. This will get you into our application to join our community called Passive Income University, where you can learn everything there is to know about starting and completing your passive income journey. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you next time for another conversation on the Passive 25K podcast.